The morning room of Pembroke Manor had always felt like a cage to Marin Vance, but never more so than today. She stood outside the closed doors, her hand frozen on the brass handle, listening to voices that would determine the rest of her life. "The debt is substantial," Lord Aldrich Pembroke was saying, his tone carrying that particular blend of oily charm and desperation that Marin had come to recognize over the past 2 years since he'd become her guardian. "But I believe we can reach an arrangement that satisfies both parties." "Your beliefs are of little interest to me." The second voice was unfamiliar, deep, clipped, belonging to someone who clearly had no patience for pleasantries. "You owe 40,000 sovereigns to the Ashenmore estate. Your brother borrowed against lands he did not own, using forged documents bearing the late Duke's seal. That is fraud. That is theft. The penalty for such crimes is hanging." Marin's blood ran cold. Her father. They were discussing her father's crimes. "My brother is dead," Lord Aldrich said quickly. "Surely the matter can be settled without involving the courts. I have a proposition that might interest His Grace." "Speak then, quickly." The Duke grows impatient with delays. There was a pause. Marin pressed closer to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "My niece," Lord Aldrich said. "Marin Vance. She is 23, educated, capable of managing a household. I understand the Duke's estate at Ashenmore has been without proper domestic oversight since his return from the Northern Campaign. I propose she serve His Grace as payment against the debt. Her service will continue until he deems the obligation fulfilled." The silence that followed was devastating. Marin's legs threatened to buckle beneath her. Her uncle was offering her as payment. Not as a wife, not even as a proper servant with wages and rights. As a possession. A thing to be used until a debt was satisfied. "The Duke does not require a housekeeper," the unfamiliar voice said flatly. "Not a housekeeper. A personal attendant. Someone to manage his domestic affairs, his correspondence, his calendar. I understand His Grace finds such tasks tedious. My niece is intelligent and discreet. She was educated at the finest ladies' academy in the capital before her family's misfortunes. She speaks 3 languages, manages accounts flawlessly, and most importantly," Lord Aldrich's voice dropped meaningfully, "she is entirely without other prospects. No family to make demands. No suitors to create complications. She would be completely at His Grace's disposal." Marin felt bile rise in her throat. Completely at his disposal. The words hung in the air like a sentence of execution. It was not entirely true, of course. Her mother still lived, but the fever that had struck 3 years ago had left her frail and dependent, residing now with a distant cousin in the countryside who could barely afford the burden. Another mouth Marin could not feed. Another life she could not protect. And if the Duke refuses this arrangement, then I suppose we proceed to the courts. Lord Aldrich's false bravado was audible even through the door. But I imagine His Grace would prefer a quiet resolution, the scandal of a fraud case, the attention it would bring to Ashenmore, the questions about why a war hero is pursuing an elderly debt with such vigor. Another pause. Longer this time. "You are bold, Lord Pembroke. Bold and foolish. The Duke does not fear scandal, and he certainly does not negotiate with men who attempt to leverage their dead brother's crimes. Then what does he want?" Lord Aldrich's desperation broke through. "Name the terms. Anything." "He wants what is owed, 40,000 sovereigns, or the equivalent value extracted through other means." A chair scraped against the floor. "The girl. Describe her." Marin is quite comely. Dark hair, unusual eyes, a shade between gray and violet. Slender, but not frail. She carries herself with dignity despite her circumstances, which I imagine His Grace would appreciate. She does not simper or weep, or make scenes. She is practical, obedient when it suits her, though I confess she has a stubborn streak that proper discipline might correct. Proper discipline. The words were repeated without inflection. You paint an interesting picture, Lord Pembroke. A disgraced lady with no options, intelligent enough to be useful, isolated enough to be controlled. One might almost think you've been preparing her for exactly this purpose. Lord Aldrich did not deny it. Marin's hands clenched at her sides. 2 years. 2 years of subtle cruelties and calculated deprivations. Dismissing her maid, reducing her wardrobe to near rags, cutting off her correspondence with friends from school, refusing to give her a reference that might allow her to seek respectable employment. Her uncle had been systematically stripping away every avenue of escape, and she had not understood why. Until now. "I will relay your proposal to His Grace," the stranger said. "He arrives at noon to inspect the property records your brother falsified. If he finds your offer acceptable, arrangements will be made immediately. If not, you will be arrested within the hour and held until trial." Immediately? Lord Aldrich sounded startled. Surely the girl will need time to pack her belongings, to prepare herself for the journey north. She will bring nothing that connects her to this house. His Grace is thorough about severing ties. If she serves Ashenmore, she belongs to Ashenmore. Clean. Complete. No divided loyalties. Footsteps approached the door. Marin stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the hall carpet. She managed to compose herself just as the door swung open, revealing a tall man in the dark military uniform of the Northern Legion. His face was scarred, his eyes assessing, and when he looked at her, she felt as though she were being catalogued, measured, priced. "Miss Vance, I presume," he said without surprise. "You were listening. There was no point denying it." "I was." "Good. Then you understand your situation." He moved past her toward the front entrance. "The Duke will arrive at noon. Be ready. And Miss Vance." He paused at the door. "He despises dishonesty above all else. Whatever you do, do not lie to him. The last person who tried is buried in the Ashenmore graveyard." The door closed behind him, and Marin stood in the empty hallway, the morning sunlight suddenly cold on her skin. She had 4 hours to prepare for a meeting with a man known throughout the kingdom as the Butcher of Valdris Pass. A man who had won the Northern War through tactics so ruthless that even his allies whispered about them in horror. A man who had reportedly executed 3 of his own officers for cowardice and shown less mercy to his enemies. And she was about to become his property. Marin looked toward the morning room where her uncle still sat, doubtless congratulating himself on his cleverness. For one wild moment, she considered running. The back gardens, the servants' gate, the road to the village. But where would she go? She had no money, no connections. The distant cousin sheltering her mother could barely afford 1 burden, let alone 2. Her uncle had made certain of that. No, running was not an option. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked toward the stairs. She would face the Duke of Ashenmore with what little dignity she had left. She would not weep. She would not beg. She would not give her uncle the satisfaction of seeing her break. And perhaps, if she was very clever and very careful, she might find a way to survive this. The clock in the hall began to chime. 8 times. 4 hours until noon. 4 hours until her life ended, or perhaps began again in a form she could not yet imagine. The Duke of Ashenmore arrived precisely as the clock struck 12. Marin watched from her bedroom window as the carriage rolled up the gravel drive, black lacquered wood, with no family crest visible. Behind it rode 6 mounted soldiers in the same dark uniforms as the man who had visited that morning. They moved with the disciplined precision of men who had seen battle and expected to see it again. The carriage door opened before a footman could reach it. He stepped out. Even from this distance, Marin could sense the controlled power in his movements. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in austere black that made no concession to current fashion. His dark hair was cropped short in the military style, and when he turned to survey the house, she caught a glimpse of his profile. Strong jaw, straight nose, a face that might have been carved from granite. Then he looked up, directly at her window, as though he had known exactly where she would be standing. Their eyes met. Marin felt something cold slide down her spine. Not fear, exactly. Something older, more primal. The instinct of prey recognizing a predator. She forced herself not to step back from the glass, not to flinch, not to look away. After a long moment, the Duke turned and strode toward the front entrance. His men followed. Marin released a breath she had not realized she was holding. 20 minutes later, a maid appeared at her door, looking terrified. "Miss Vance, you're wanted in the study, immediately!" The study was Lord Aldrich's domain, a room filled with her late father's books that her uncle had never bothered to read. When Marin entered, she found 3 men waiting. Her uncle, visibly perspiring despite the cool morning. The scarred officer from earlier, standing at attention by the window. And seated in her father's chair, behind her father's desk, the Duke of Ashenmore. He was even more imposing up close. His eyes were a strange shade of amber, almost gold in the light streaming through the windows. A thin scar bisected his left eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline. His hands, resting on the desk before him, bore the calluses of a man who had wielded weapons, not merely owned them. "Miss Vance," his voice was deeper than she had expected, with a roughness that suggested shouted commands over battlefield chaos. "Approach." She walked forward until she stood before the desk, acutely aware that she was being examined like livestock at market. "Your uncle has explained the terms." It was not a question. "I overheard them this morning, Your Grace." A flicker of interest crossed those amber eyes. "Captain Garrick mentioned you were eavesdropping. A habit of yours?" "A necessity, Your Grace. My uncle rarely tells me anything directly. If I wish to know what plans are being made for my life, I must discover them myself." Lord Aldrich made a strangled sound of protest. "Marin, mind your tongue. You're speaking to a duke." "I'm aware of whom I'm addressing, Uncle." She kept her gaze fixed on the Duke. "I assumed His Grace would prefer honesty to simpering. I was told he despises liars." The corner of the Duke's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but near enough. "Captain Garrick has been sharing my preferences, I see." He leaned back in the chair, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Tell me, Miss Vance, do you understand what you're being offered?" "I'm not being offered anything, Your Grace. I'm being sold to settle my father's debts. The distinction matters." Lord Aldrich went pale. "Your Grace, I apologize for my niece. She has always been headstrong. A firm hand will soon correct her." "Be silent, Pembroke. I'm speaking with the woman whose life I'm about to purchase." The Duke did not raise his voice, but Lord Aldrich immediately stopped talking. "You're correct, Miss Vance. This is not an offer. It is a transaction. Your uncle has proposed your service in exchange for the 40,000 sovereigns your father stole from my family. I am inclined to accept." Marin felt her stomach plummet, but she kept her expression neutral. "And the terms of this service, Your Grace? You will manage my household at Ashenmore, correspondence, accounts, domestic staff, the tedious minutiae that I have neither time nor patience to address. You will be housed appropriately, fed adequately, and treated according to your station." "Which station would that be, Your Grace? I confess I'm unclear whether I'm to be a servant, a prisoner, or something else entirely." The Duke rose from the chair. He was even taller standing, towering over her by nearly a foot. He moved around the desk until he stood directly before her, close enough that she could smell leather and wood smoke and something darker beneath. "You will be whatever I require you to be, Miss Vance. The duration of your service depends entirely on your usefulness." His eyes held hers. "I am told you are intelligent, capable, and stubborn. The first two qualities I value. The third will either serve you well or destroy you. We shall see which." "And if I refuse?" Lord Aldrich gasped. The captain by the window tensed. The Duke merely tilted his head, as if she had said something unexpectedly interesting. "Then your uncle hangs for fraud. You are left destitute with no protection, and I seize this property regardless. The debt is owed, Miss Vance. The only question is how it will be paid." Marin understood then, with perfect clarity, that she had no choice. Perhaps she had never had a choice. From the moment her father had made his desperate bargain with forged documents and stolen seals, her fate had been moving toward this moment. "Very well, Your Grace." She was proud that her voice did not shake. "I accept your terms." "You accept." He repeated the word as though tasting it. "How gracious of you." He turned to the captain. "Have her things loaded into the second carriage. We leave within the hour." "Your Grace." Marin spoke before she could stop herself. "I was told I could bring nothing from this house." The Duke paused. "That is correct." "Then what, precisely, am I meant to wear?" "I have only the clothes on my back that did not come from my uncle's charity." For a moment, something unreadable passed across his face. Then he looked at Captain Garrick. "Have Mistress Gwyneth prepare appropriate garments when we arrive. Miss Vance is correct. She should not carry the stench of this place with her." It was, Marin realized, almost a kindness. Almost. The Duke strode toward the door, then stopped. Without turning, he spoke once more. "1 hour, Miss Vance. Do not keep me waiting. I am not a patient man." He left. The captain followed. And Marin stood in her father's study, in her uncle's house, knowing that in 1 hour she would belong to neither. She would belong to him. The journey to Ashenmoor took 3 days. Marin traveled in the second carriage, alone except for the occasional presence of Captain Garrick, who checked on her at intervals with professional detachment. She was given meals at coaching inns, but not permitted to dine in public rooms. She slept in the carriage while the soldiers made camp nearby. She was not mistreated, but she was also not acknowledged as anything other than cargo being transported. The Duke himself she did not see. He rode at the front of the column, a dark figure on a massive black warhorse, never looking back. On the third morning, the terrain changed. The rolling farmland of the south gave way to stark moorland, all heather and granite, and skies that threatened rain without delivering it. The wind carried a bitter edge, even in late summer, and the few villages they passed grew smaller and more isolated. "Ashenmoor," Captain Garrick said, appearing at the carriage window. "We arrive within the hour." Marin looked out at the bleak landscape. "Does the sun ever shine here?" "Occasionally. The Duke prefers it this way. Fewer visitors." She could believe that. Ashenmoor itself emerged from the mist like something from a fever dream. The estate was massive, a sprawling fortress of gray stone that seemed to have grown organically from the surrounding rock. Towers jutted at irregular angles, some clearly ancient, others added over centuries of expansion. Ivy crawled up the eastern walls, and ravens circled the highest parapets, their cries echoing across the empty moor. It was beautiful in a savage, uncompromising way. It was also utterly terrifying. The carriage rolled through iron gates and into a courtyard where servants waited in silent rows. Marin counted at least 30, all dressed in the same dark livery, all watching with expressions carefully blank. Captain Garrick opened the carriage door. "Welcome to your new home, Miss Vance." She stepped out onto the ancient cobblestones and felt immediately exposed. The servants studied her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. The Duke was nowhere to be seen. A woman stepped forward from the assembled staff. She was perhaps 50, iron-haired and steel-spined, with the bearing of someone who had commanded armies of housemaids for decades. "Miss Vance, I am Mistress Gwyneth, housekeeper of Ashenmore." Her tone was civil, but not warm. "I will show you to your quarters and explain your duties. Follow me." Marin followed her through a labyrinth of corridors, up winding staircases, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, who all seemed to share the Duke's unsettling amber eyes. The house smelled of wood smoke and old stone, and something else, something metallic that she could not identify. "Your rooms are in the West Tower," Mistress Gwyneth said as they climbed. "You will have privacy there. The Duke's apartments are in the East Wing. You are not to enter that area unless explicitly summoned." "Understood." Meals are served in the small dining room at 7, 12, and 6. You may request a tray in your rooms if you prefer, though His Grace expects you to dine with him on occasions he specifies. "Dine with him?" Mistress Gwyneth paused on the stairs. "You are not a scullery maid, Miss Vance. Whatever arrangement brought you here, you will be treated according to the station His Grace assigns you. Currently, that station appears to be something between guest and employee. I suggest you not question it." They reached a heavy oak door. Mistress Gwyneth produced a key and opened it to reveal a sitting room that, while not luxurious, was comfortable and well-appointed. A fire already crackled in the hearth. Through an adjoining door, Marin glimpsed a bedroom with a 4-poster bed, draped in deep green velvet. "There are clothes in the wardrobe," Mistress Gwyneth said. "Basic items until proper measurements can be taken. His Grace wishes to see you in his study at 4 o'clock. That gives you 2 hours to rest and prepare." "His study? To discuss your duties?" The housekeeper moved toward the door. "A word of advice, Miss Vance. The Duke is not cruel, but he is demanding. He expects competence and despises excuses. If you cannot perform a task, say so honestly. He will respect that. If you fail while claiming capability, he will not forget it. Thank you for the warning." "It is not a warning. It is survival information." Mistress Gwyneth's expression softened fractionally. "I have served this family for 30 years. The current Duke is not like his father or his grandfather. The war changed him, made him harder. But there is fairness in him, if you know where to look for it." She left before Marin could respond. Alone in her new rooms, Marin sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself one moment of despair. Then she stood, washed her face with water from the basin, and went to examine the wardrobe. The clothes were simple but well made. Dark colors, practical fabrics. Nothing that suggested either servant or lady. She chose a charcoal gray dress with minimal adornment and dressed with care. Her hair she pinned back severely. No jewelry, no artifice. If the Duke wanted honesty, she would give him honesty in every detail. At precisely 4 o'clock, she presented herself at the study door. "Enter." The Duke's study was enormous, lined with maps and military diagrams rather than books. A massive desk dominated the center, covered with papers and correspondence, and behind it sat the man who now owned her service, if not her soul. He did not look up when she entered. "Close the door. Sit." She obeyed, choosing a chair across from his desk and folding her hands in her lap. For several minutes, he continued reading documents, signing some, discarding others. Marin waited in silence, understanding that this was a test. He wanted to see if she would fidget, protest, and demand attention. She did none of those things. Finally, he set down his pen and looked at her. "You did not complain during the journey," he said. Captain Garrick reported that you made no demands, caused no difficulties, asked no questions. Would questions have been answered, Your Grace? No. Then asking them would have been pointless. His mouth curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Your uncle described you as intelligent. I'm beginning to believe he was not exaggerating. He leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Miss Vance, what do you actually know about managing a household? I managed my father's household from the age of 16 until his death. Before his financial difficulties, we employed 12 servants and entertained regularly. I have experience with accounts, staff management, correspondence, and event planning. And since then, I have been my uncle's unpaid domestic labor, performing the duties of housekeeper, cook, and maid, while he dismissed the actual servants to save money. She met his eyes directly. I am not unacquainted with hard work, at Your Grace. Hard work, he considered the phrase. And what of the harder aspects of this position? You understand you are not simply managing a household. You are managing my household. That means knowing things others do not know, keeping secrets that could damage powerful people, being present for conversations that never happened. I understand, Your Grace. Do you? He rose and moved around the desk, approaching her chair with that predatory grace she would come to know well. He stopped directly before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. I have enemies, Miss Vance. Men who would pay handsomely for information about my affairs. Women who would trade their virtue for gossip that might harm me. If you betray my confidence, I will know, and the consequences will be severe. I have no intention of betraying you, Your Grace. Intentions are meaningless. Actions are what matter. He studied her face with unnerving intensity, as though searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Why are you not afraid of me? The question startled her. I beg your pardon? Everyone is afraid of me. My servants, my officers, my enemies, even my allies maintain a careful distance. But you sit there with your spine straight and your eyes steady, and you do not flinch when I approach. He leaned closer. Why? Marin considered the question seriously. Perhaps because I have already lost everything, Your Grace. My family, my home, my freedom. Fear is a luxury for those who still have something to protect. I have only myself, and I learned long ago that I can survive more than I ever imagined. Something stirred in those wolf-colored eyes. Something that might have been recognition, or respect, or something else entirely that she could not name. We shall see, Miss Vance. He straightened, stepping back. Your duties begin tomorrow. Mistress Gwyneth will provide you with the household accounts. I expect a full assessment of inefficiencies within the week. We will meet each morning at 7 to review correspondence, and each evening at 6 to discuss any matters requiring my attention. Yes, Your Grace. One more thing. He returned to his desk, but did not sit. I am not a patient man, Miss Vance. I am not a kind man. I am not a man who tolerates failure or forgives betrayal. But I am fair. Serve me well, and you will be treated accordingly. Serve me poorly, and you will discover why they call me the Butcher of Valdris Pass. He sat and returned his attention to his papers. Marin rose, understanding she was dismissed. She walked to the door with measured steps, refusing to hurry despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. Miss Vance, she paused with her hand on the door handle. You asked why I accepted your uncle's offer. A household manager can be hired. Your service, specifically, was not necessary. Her heart stuttered. Then why, Your Grace? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, become something rougher and more dangerous. Because when you looked at me through that window at Pembroke Manor, you did not look away. Everyone looks away. You did not. He paused. I find myself curious about a woman who stares into the face of a monster and does not flinch. That curiosity may prove to be your salvation or your ruin. We shall discover which together. Maren left the study with his words echoing in her mind. Curiosity. The butcher of Valdres Pass was curious about her. She was not certain whether to be relieved or terrified. Perhaps both. The first week at Ashenmore passed in a blur of ledgers, inventories, and carefully concealed chaos. Maren had expected the household accounts to be disorganized. She had not expected them to be a complete disaster. The previous steward, she learned, had fled 6 months ago after the Duke discovered him skimming funds. Since then, Mistress Gwyneth had managed as best she could, but the woman's talents lay in commanding servants, not balancing books. These figures cannot possibly be correct, Maren said on her 3rd morning, spreading papers across the small desk in her sitting room. According to this ledger, Ashenmore has been purchasing enough candles to illuminate the entire northern kingdom. Mistress Gwyneth peered over her shoulder. The chandler in Thornwick has been our supplier for decades, and has been overcharging you for at least 3 years, based on these invoices. Maren circled a column of numbers. Either he believes the Duke too distracted to notice, or someone in this household has been taking a percentage. The housekeeper's expression hardened. You're suggesting theft. I'm suggesting investigation. The Duke asked for inefficiencies. This qualifies. By the end of the week, Maren had identified 4 separate instances of supplier fraud, and 2 servants who had been quietly selling kitchen stores out the back entrance. She compiled her findings into a detailed report and presented it at her evening meeting with the Duke, fully expecting him to be furious. Instead, he read the document in silence, his expression unreadable. You found all this in 7 days, he said finally. It was not a question. The records were poorly maintained, Your Grace. The discrepancies were not difficult to spot once I organized the accounts properly. The previous steward was here for 3 years. He found nothing. The previous steward was likely receiving a portion of the profits, Your Grace. His sudden departure suggests he realized the arrangement would not survive scrutiny. The Duke set down the report. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, those amber eyes weighing and measuring in that way she was beginning to recognize. You have recommendations? Dismiss the 2 servants involved in the kitchen theft, terminate the arrangement with the chandler, and find an honest supplier. And, she hesitated, hire an assistant for Mistress Gwyneth. The woman is competent, but she cannot manage both household operations and financial oversight. It is too much for one person. An assistant would require additional expense. An assistant would prevent future losses that far exceed the cost of wages, Your Grace. A ghost of amusement crossed his features, transforming his harsh face into something almost human. Implement your recommendations, Miss Vance. You have my authority to make whatever changes you deem necessary. She stared at him. Your Grace? You heard me. He returned his attention to other papers. I did not bring you here to question your every decision. You have demonstrated competence. Use it. It was, Maren realized, an extraordinary degree of trust for a man who had made clear he trusted no one. She was not certain how to feel about it. Thank you, Your Grace. Do not thank me. Deliver results. But his tone had lost some of its customary coldness. That will be all for tonight, Miss Vance. She rose to leave, then paused. Your Grace. Might I ask a question? He looked up, one eyebrow raised. The servants, they watch me constantly. Not with hostility precisely, but with something I cannot identify. I would understand the scrutiny if I were a stranger, but it feels like something more, as though they are waiting for something. The Duke was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. They are waiting to see if you survive. survive. I have had 3 household managers since returning from the war, Miss Vance. The first stole from me. The second fled after 1 month, claiming the house was haunted. The third—" He paused. "The third made the mistake of attempting to sell information about my affairs to Lord Castellan of Whitmore. She did not survive the discovery." Marin felt ice slide through her veins. "You killed her?" "I did not have to. Lord Castellan did, when she became a liability to his own schemes." The Duke's eyes held hers. "Ashenmore is not a forgiving place, Miss Vance. The servants watch because they are curious whether you will prove yourself worthy of remaining or whether you will become another cautionary tale whispered in the kitchen." He returned to his papers. Marin left the study with her pulse racing. Survival. That was what this was. Not merely service, but survival. She would not become a cautionary tale. She refused. The first test came 3 weeks into her service, and it arrived without warning. Marin was reviewing supply orders in the small office she had claimed near the kitchens when Captain Garrick appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Miss Vance, you're needed in the Great Hall. Immediately." She followed him through the winding corridors, her mind racing with possibilities. Had she made an error? Offended someone important? Discovered something she should not have? The Great Hall of Ashenmore was a cavernous space, clearly designed for hosting military councils rather than social gatherings. Massive iron chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling. Tapestries depicting ancient battles lined the walls. And standing in the center of the room, surrounded by a dozen armed men, was the Duke. Facing him was a delegation Marin did not recognize. 5 men in the colors of House Castellan, the very name that had been mentioned in connection with the murdered household manager. Ah. One of the visitors, a portly man with cold eyes, spotted Marin's entrance. And here she is, the mysterious new addition to Ashenmore's staff. "Tell me, Your Grace, where did you find such a pretty little thing? The slave markets of the Eastern Reach?" "Lord Castellan," the Duke's voice could have frozen fire, "you will address Miss Vance with respect, or you will not address anyone at all." Lord Castellan smiled, showing too many teeth. "So protective. One might almost think she's more than a servant." He turned to Marin. "Tell me, girl, what exactly are your duties here? Managing the household? Or managing the Duke's more personal needs?" Marin felt the insult land, but she did not flinch. She had endured worse from her uncle's friends. "I manage accounts and correspondence, my lord," she said evenly. "Nothing more." "How disappointing. Though I suppose the butcher of Valdres Pass has little need for soft comforts." Castellan turned back to the Duke. "Now, about the matter we came to discuss. The northern trade route. My consortium requires access through Ashenmore lands. We're prepared to pay handsomely for the privilege. And I have already refused, 3 times. Perhaps the 4th time will prove more persuasive." Castellan gestured, and 2 of his men stepped forward carrying a heavy chest. They opened it to reveal gold coins, hundreds of them, gleaming in the torchlight. 50,000 sovereigns, more than enough to offset any concerns about increased traffic through your territory. The Duke did not look at the gold. His eyes remained fixed on Castellan. "The northern trade route passes through Valdres Pass," he said quietly. "The same pass where 3,000 of my men died holding the line against the Caridian invasion. The same pass that is now a memorial to their sacrifice. You want to turn a graveyard into a merchant highway. Progress requires sacrifice, Your Grace. Surely a military man understands that." The tension in the hall was suffocating. Marin could see the Duke's men gripping their weapons, waiting for a signal. She could see Castellan's guards doing the same. One wrong word, and this room would become a battlefield. "Miss Vance," She startled at the Duke's voice. "Your Grace." "You have reviewed the estate's financial records. Tell Lord Castellan what Ashenmoor's annual income amounts to." She understood instantly what he was doing. He wanted Castellan to understand that his bribe was meaningless. "Ashenmoor generates approximately 200,000 sovereigns annually, my lord," she said clearly. "From agricultural leases, mining rights, and military contracts with the Crown. The estate has no debts and maintains reserves sufficient to operate independently for a decade." Castellan's smile faltered. "Your 50,000 sovereigns," the Duke said softly, "would not cover my quarterly expenses. You offer me nothing I need, in exchange for desecrating ground that holds the bones of better men than you will ever be." He stepped forward. "Leave Ashenmoor. Do not return. And if you ever speak to Miss Vance with such disrespect again, I will remove your tongue personally." The words were delivered without heat, which made them infinitely more terrifying. Castellan's face flushed with humiliation and rage. For a moment, Marin thought he might actually draw his sword. Then survival instinct overcame pride. "This is not over, Ashenmoor. It is for today. Captain Garrick, escort our guests to the border of my lands. Ensure they do not linger." Marin watched as Castellan and his men were marched out of the hall. Only when the doors closed behind them did she allow herself to breathe. The Duke turned to her. "You did well. I merely stated facts, Your Grace. You stated them without hesitation, under pressure, in front of an enemy who was attempting to humiliate you. That is not merely stating facts. That is tactical competence." He moved closer. "Castellan will remember you now. He will consider you an asset worth targeting. You understand what that means? It means I have made an enemy. It means you have made my enemy your enemy." His golden eyes held hers. "That makes you my responsibility, Miss Vance. As long as you serve Ashenmoor, no harm will come to you. I give you my word." It was the first time he had offered her anything resembling protection, the first time he had acknowledged that she was more than a ledger entry, more than a debt being paid. "Thank you, Your Grace." He nodded once, then turned away. "We dine together tonight. I find I wish to discuss something with you." It was not a request. Marin spent the remainder of the afternoon wondering what, exactly, the Duke of Ashenmoor wished to discuss, and why the prospect filled her with more anticipation than fear. Dinner that night was served in the Duke's private dining room, a smaller space than the Great Hall, but no less imposing. Heavy oak furniture, ancient weapons mounted on the walls, and candles that cast dancing shadows across surfaces that had witnessed centuries of meals, treaties, and conspiracies. Marin had dressed carefully, choosing the deep burgundy gown that Mistress Gwyneth had provided, the nicest item in her limited wardrobe. She told herself it was merely appropriate for a formal dinner. It had nothing to do with wanting to look well for him. The Duke was already seated when she arrived, and he rose as she entered, an unexpected courtesy that sent warmth flooding through her chest. "Miss Vance, please, sit." They ate in relative silence at first, working through courses of roasted pheasant and winter vegetables, while the fire crackled in the hearth. Marin found herself stealing glances at him across the table, noting the way the candlelight played across his scarred features, softening them somehow. "You handled yourself admirably today," he said finally, setting down his wineglass. "Castellan is a dangerous man. He does not forgive slights, and he never forgets useful information. You said I had become a target. You have, which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Marin set down her own glass. "Of course, Your Grace." "Do you wish to leave?" The question stunned her. "I beg your pardon?" "Ashenmoor, this arrangement." He gestured vaguely. "I brought you here to pay a debt your father incurred. You had no choice in the matter. But I have watched you these past weeks, and I find that I am uncomfortable with the circumstances of your arrival. Uncomfortable? You are not a servant, Miss Vance. Not truly. You manage my household with more competence than anyone who has held the position before you. You speak to me without fear, which is either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. You have made yourself valuable. He paused. I do not wish to keep someone valuable against their will. Marin stared at him. Are you offering to release me from my obligation? I am offering you a choice. If you wish to leave, I will provide you with funds sufficient to establish yourself independently. A modest home somewhere, an income that will keep you comfortable. Your father's debt will be considered settled. You would owe me nothing. And if I choose to stay? Something shifted in his expression, something heated and hungry that made her breath catch. If you stay, it will be because you choose to stay, not because you are compelled, not because you have no other options, because you wish to be here. He leaned forward. I find that I want that, Miss Vance. I want you to choose this. Choose Ashenmore. Choose to remain. His voice had dropped, become rougher, and Marin suddenly understood what she was hearing beneath the words. He was not simply offering her freedom. He was asking her to stay. Your Grace. She hesitated, uncertain how to navigate this dangerous territory. I am not certain what you are truly asking me. Neither am I. He rose from his chair and moved around the table until he stood beside her. I told you that first day that I was curious about you. A woman who does not flinch. A woman who stares into the face of a monster without looking away. He reached down and tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. That curiosity has grown into something else. Something I do not entirely understand. His touch sent fire racing through her veins. She should pull away. She should maintain the proper distance between servant and master, between a disgraced lady and a duke. She did not move. I am not afraid of you, she said quietly. No, you are not. His thumb traced along her jawline, a feather-light touch that made her shiver. Why not? Everyone is afraid of me. Even the men who served beside me in battle maintain a careful distance. But you, perhaps because I see something in you that others do not. And what is that? A man who protects a graveyard because he remembers the names of every soldier buried there. A man who threatens violence against those who insult a servant, but offers that same servant freedom when he realizes she is uncomfortable. A man who asks rather than commands, when asking is harder. His hand stilled against her face. You see too much, Miss Vance. Marin, she heard herself say. If I am to choose whether to stay, you should at least call me by my name. Something flared in those amber eyes. Marin. Her name in his voice was a revelation. Low and rough and intimate in a way that made her pulse race. Your Grace. Kyle. He said it like a confession. If you are to be Marin, then I am Kyle. At least here, when we are alone. Kyle. The name suited him better than any title could. Strong and stark and uncompromising. Kyle, she repeated softly. He drew in a sharp breath. Then, with visible effort, he released her and stepped back. You do not need to decide tonight. Take time. Consider your options. His voice had regained some of its usual control, but she could see the effort it cost him. I will not ask again. Whatever you choose, I will accept. He walked to the door. Kyle. He paused, his back to her. I do not need time. She rose from her chair. I choose to stay. He turned slowly. You're certain? I have been certain since you threatened to remove Lord Castellan's tongue for insulting me. She smiled, surprising herself with the expression. A woman notices when a man defends her honor. It makes an impression. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A real laugh, full and warm, and nothing like the cold man who had collected her from her uncle's house 3 weeks ago. "You are going to be the death of me, Marin Vance. Or your salvation, your grace. We shall discover which together." She had thrown his own words back at him, and from the look in his eyes, he recognized them. "Together, then," he said quietly. He left her standing in the candlelit dining room with her heart pounding and her thoughts in chaos. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen him. And somewhere in the last 3 weeks, she had begun to fall in love with a man the world called the Butcher of Valdres Pass. The question now was whether he was falling too, or whether she was walking into a trap from which there would be no escape. The weeks that followed Marin's decision to stay at Ashenmore brought changes she had not anticipated. Kyle began materializing at unexpected moments. He would appear in the library while she reviewed accounts, claiming he needed a particular volume. He would join her for morning walks through the gardens, insisting the fresh air aided his thinking. He would linger after their evening meetings, asking questions about her past, her interests, her opinions on matters that had nothing to do with household management. "You're hovering," Captain Garrick observed one afternoon, watching the Duke trail Marin through the portrait gallery, at a distance he clearly believed was subtle. "I am not hovering. I am ensuring the household manager is performing her duties adequately." "You're hovering. I've served you for 12 years, Your Grace. I know what hovering looks like." Cale's expression could have curdled milk. "Don't you have soldiers to drill?" Garrick departed with a knowing smile that made the Duke's jaw clench. Marin pretended not to notice these exchanges, but she noticed everything. She noticed how his eyes followed her when she moved through a room, how his voice softened when he spoke her name, how he found excuses to touch her, brief brushes of fingers when passing documents, a hand at the small of her back when guiding her through doorways. She noticed the darker edges of his attention, too, the possessiveness that flared when male servants addressed her directly, the cold fury that descended when Lord Whitmore sent a letter inquiring whether the Duke's lovely assistant might be available to help organize his autumn ball. The way Kyle had personally written a response so scathing that Whitmore had not communicated with Ashenmore since. "You cannot threaten everyone who speaks to me," Marin said one evening, after learning that a visiting merchant had been escorted from the property for complimenting her eyes. "I did not threaten him. I merely suggested that his compliments would be better directed toward the goods he was selling, rather than my household staff." "Your household staff?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is that what I am? You know perfectly well what you are." "Do I?" She set down the correspondence she had been reviewing. "Because sometimes I feel less like an employee and more like a possession you're guarding, a treasure locked away in a tower." Something crossed his face. Guilt, perhaps, or recognition. "I am not trying to imprison you, Marin." "Then what are you trying to do?" He rose from his desk and moved toward her, that controlled, lethal elegance she had come to recognize. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell cedar and steel, and the scent that was uniquely him. "I am trying," he said slowly, as though the words cost him, "to keep you safe, to keep you here, to ensure that no one takes you from me, takes me from you, as though I belonged to you. Don't you?" His voice had dropped to something raw and hungry. "Didn't you choose to stay? Didn't you choose this? Choose me? I chose to remain at Ashenmore. That is not the same as belonging to someone like a horse or a hunting dog. I know that." He reached up, his fingers hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I know that. And yet I cannot stop this thing inside me. This need to know where you are, who you're speaking with, whether you're safe. It consumes me, Marin. You consume me." The confession hung between them, terrifying in its intensity. Kyle, I have never wanted anything the way I want you. His amber eyes burned into hers. Not victory in battle. Not revenge against my enemies. Not even survival during the darkest days of the war. I would burn kingdoms for you. I would destroy anyone who tried to harm you. And that frightens me, because I do not know how to want something without destroying it. Maren felt her heart fracturing along fault lines she had not known existed. You will not destroy me, she whispered. You cannot know that. I cannot know that. His hand finally made contact, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. I am the butcher of Valdres Pass. I am the monster who sacrificed 3,000 men to hold a line that should never have held. I do not know how to love without bloodshed. I do not know how to protect without possession. I do not know how to want without obsession. Then learn. She covered his hand with her own. Learn with me. Because I am not going anywhere, Kyle. Not because I have no choices, but because I choose you. Every day. Even when you are difficult and possessive and impossible. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You should run. Probably. But I have never been particularly sensible. He kissed her. It was not gentle. It was not polite. It was desperate and hungry and consuming. Everything he had confessed made physical. His hands tangled in her hair. His body pressed her against the bookshelf behind her. His mouth claimed hers as though he were drowning, and she was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Maren saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Tell me to stop, he said roughly. Tell me this is too much, too fast, too intense. Tell me, and I will try to control myself. I will try to give you space. And if I don't want space, his grip on her tightened, then I will never let you go. Do you understand? If you give yourself to me, Maren Vance, you will be mine, completely, irrevocably. There will be no escape. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Then I am yours, she said simply. Completely, irrevocably, and you are mine. The sound he made was pure possession. The kiss that followed promised everything and demanded more. And Maren surrendered to the man the world called a monster, knowing that somewhere in the darkness of his obsession, she had found the light of genuine love. The dawn brought clarity she had not expected. Maren woke in her own bed, alone, the memory of Kyle's kisses burning on her lips. He had stopped before things went too far, pulling away with obvious reluctance and escorting her to her rooms with a formality that contradicted everything that had just happened between them. We will do this properly, he had said, his voice still rough. I will not have you as a mere conquest. When I take you to my bed, it will be as my wife. Wife. The word echoed through her thoughts as she dressed and prepared for the day. Wife of the Duke of Ashenmore. Duchess. A title she had never imagined. A future she had never dared to want. But in the light of morning, doubts crept in like shadows. She found Kyle in his study, reviewing military dispatches. He looked up when she entered, and the naked hope in his expression made her heart ache. We need to talk, she said. His expression shuddered immediately. Those words rarely precede anything pleasant. They precede honesty, which you claim to value above all else. She sat across from him, folding her hands to hide their trembling. Last night, what you said, what we. I meant every word. I know you did. That's what concerns me. He set down his papers with careful control. Explain. You spoke of obsession, of not knowing how to want without destroying, of possession and burning kingdoms, and never letting me go. She met his eyes directly. Kyle, those are not the words of a man offering partnership. Those are the words of a man claiming ownership. There is a difference, a significant one. She leaned forward. I will not be a possession. I will not be locked in a tower while you rage at anyone who dares look at me. I will not spend my life as an object of your obsession, however passionate that obsession might be. You think that is what I'm offering? I think you don't know the difference. I think you have spent so long as the butcher of Valdres Pass, commanding men and destroying enemies, that you have forgotten how to relate to people who are not soldiers or threats. And you believe you cannot teach me? I believe that is not my responsibility. The words hurt to say, but they needed to be said. I am not here to fix you, Kyle. I am not a healer for whatever wounds the war left on your soul. If we are to be together, it must be as equals. Partners. Not a monster and his tamer. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of all its usual authority. You are right. She had not expected agreement. I am? I've been treating you as something to be acquired and protected, rather than someone to be cherished and respected. He rose and moved to the window, his back to her. The war took something from me, Maren. Some part of myself that knew how to be gentle, how to trust, how to love without strategy. I thought those parts were gone forever. And then you arrived, and I felt them stirring, and I did not know what to do with them. So I defaulted to what I know. Command, control, possession. That is not love. No, it is not. He turned to face her. But I want to learn, if you will teach me. If you will be patient with a man who has forgotten more about war than he ever knew about tenderness. And if you cannot change, if the obsession overwhelms the love, then you tell me, honestly, directly, as you have done today. And I will hear you, even when it hurts, even when I want nothing more than to sweep you into my arms and ignore every objection. His expression softened. You are not a possession, Maren. You are a miracle, and I would rather lose you to honesty than keep you through control. She felt tears prick her eyes. That is the first thing you've said that sounds like a man I could actually marry. Then teach me to say more such things. He crossed to her, kneeling before her chair, so their eyes were level. I am asking, not commanding. Will you give me the chance to become the man you deserve? I don't know if I can, because you don't trust me or because you don't trust yourself. The question cut to the heart of her fear. Both, she admitted. I have been powerless for so long. First under my father's failing fortunes, then under my uncle's cruelty. I swore I would never again be at someone's mercy. And you, Kyle, you are the most dangerous man I have ever known. Loving you would make me vulnerable in ways I have spent years avoiding. Then we are both afraid. He took her hands in his. I fear destroying you. You fear being destroyed. Perhaps the only way forward is to face those fears together. She looked at him, this complicated, terrifying, unexpectedly tender man. Together, she repeated slowly, but not yet. His face fell. Not yet? I need time, Kyle. Time to be certain this is real, and not just intensity born of isolation and proximity. Time to know my own heart, without the pressure of your presence overwhelming my judgment. How much time? A month. Give me a month of distance. Separate meals, formal interactions. Let me miss you before I commit to forever. It was clearly not what he wanted. She could see the protest building behind his eyes. But he swallowed it. 1 month, he agreed, his voice strained. But I reserve the right to change your mind through actions rather than words. If I cannot speak to you of love, I will demonstrate it instead. That seems fair. He rose, releasing her hands with visible reluctance. 1 month. And then, Maren Vance, I intend to make you my wife, whether you like it or not. That sounds rather like a command, Your Grace. Consider it a statement of intent." He smiled, and despite everything, her heart fluttered. "I have never lost a battle I was determined to win. I do not intend to start now." He left her sitting in the study, her emotions in chaos, and her resolve already wavering. 1 month. She had asked for 1 month. She was not certain she would survive even 1 week. The month of distance proved impossible to complete, not because Kyle broke his word. True to his promise, he kept their interactions formal and limited. Meals were taken separately. Meetings focused strictly on household matters. He did not touch her, did not use her given name, and did not look at her with that burning intensity that made her forget every sensible objection. But his actions spoke louder than any words could have. Fresh flowers appeared in her rooms every morning, different varieties each day, arranged with obvious care. Books she had mentioned wanting to read materialized on her desk without explanation. When she developed a slight cold, a physician was summoned from the capital before she had even finished her first sneeze. When she mentioned missing her mother's recipe for honey cakes, the kitchen produced a perfect recreation 2 days later. The recipe traced through 5 counties to a distant cousin of her family's former cook. He was courting her, quietly, relentlessly, through every small kindness he could devise. And Maren found her resistance crumbling like sand. "You're weakening," Mistress Gwyneth observed one afternoon, watching Maren smile at yet another unexpected gift. This time, a shawl woven in the exact shade of violet that matched her eyes. "I am doing nothing of the sort." "You've worn that shawl every day for a week. You spent an hour yesterday pressing the flowers he sent into a journal. And you watch the door of every room you enter, as though hoping he'll walk through it." Maren felt her cheeks flush. "That is not." "It is. And there's no shame in it." The housekeeper's expression softened. "He's a good man, Miss Vance. Difficult and demanding, and occasionally terrifying, but good underneath it all. The war took much from him, but his core remained sound. How can you be certain?" "Because I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching." Gwyneth smiled. "That is not the look of a man who wishes to possess. That is the look of a man who has found something precious and fears losing it. There is a difference." Before Maren could respond, Captain Garrick burst through the door. "Miss Vance, you need to come immediately." His face was pale, his usual composure shattered. Maren's chest tightened with every step as they rushed through the corridors toward the Great Hall. "What's happened?" "Lord Castellan. He's returned, with 50 men." Garrick grabbed her arm. "And he's demanding you be turned over to him." "Turned over? On what grounds?" "He claims he has evidence that your father's fraud extended to his estate as well. Says you're complicit in crimes against House Castellan and must face trial in his territory." "That's absurd. I was a child when my father made those forgeries." "Castellan doesn't care about truth. He cares about revenge." Garrick's grip tightened. "His Grace refused to hand you over. Castellan is threatening armed conflict if his demands aren't met." They reached the Great Hall. The scene inside stopped Maren's breath. Kyle stood at the center of the room, flanked by a dozen of his men. Across from him, Lord Castellan and his soldiers formed a bristling line of weapons and hostility. The air crackled with violence waiting to erupt. "Ah, there she is." Castellan's cold eyes fixed on Maren. The criminal herself. How convenient. "She is no criminal." Kyle's voice was deadly quiet. "And she will not be leaving Ashenmoor." "Then you are harboring a fugitive. The Crown takes a dim view of such actions, even from war heroes." "The Crown will take a dimmer view of a lord attempting to seize a woman from her protector through fabricated charges and armed intimidation." "Protector?" Castellan laughed. "Is that what you call it?" "The gossip says something rather different. They say the butcher of Valdris Pass has found himself a bed warmer and wrapped it in pretty language about household management. Cale moved so fast, Marin barely saw it. One moment he stood at the center of the hall. The next, his sword was at Castellan's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "Say that again," Kyle whispered. "Please, give me a reason." Castellan's men surged forward, but Kyle's soldiers blocked them, weapons drawn, ready for the bloodbath that seemed inevitable. "Kyle," Marin's voice cut through the tension. "Don't." His eyes flicked to her, wild with protective fury. "He insulted you. And if you kill him for it, you become the villain everyone already believes you to be. His death will not protect me. It will only give his allies justification to come after both of us." She could see the battle raging inside him, the monster wanting blood, the man wanting to prove he could be better. "Listen to your woman, Ashenmore," Castellan sneered, though his voice trembled slightly. "She's cleverer than you deserve." "She is." Kyle held the sword steady for one more heartbeat. Then, forcing himself to move, he stepped back. "Leave. Now. Before I change my mind. This isn't over." "No. But it will be." Cale's expression promised violence that made Castellan pale. "I will take this matter to the Crown myself. Your fabricated charges, your armed intimidation, your attempt to seize a woman under my protection. By the time I'm finished, you will be the one facing trial." Castellan's composure finally cracked. "You wouldn't dare. I am the butcher of Valdris Pass. I won 300 battles through audacity and brutality. There is nothing I would not dare when protecting what is mine." The word hung in the air. Mine. And this time, when Kyle said it, Marin did not hear possession. She heard love. Castellan left, his threats trailing behind him like smoke. When the hall finally emptied of enemies, Cale turned to Marin. His hands were shaking. "Are you injured?" "No. But you." "Marin." He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "God, Marin. When Garrick told me what Castellan wanted, I thought, I know." She held him just as tightly. "I know. I almost killed him. I wanted to kill him. Every instinct I have demanded blood. But you didn't, because you asked me not to." He pulled back to look at her. "Is that what you needed to see? Proof that I can control myself when it matters?" She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I needed to see that you could choose me over your own rage, that my voice could reach you even when the monster was screaming for violence. Your voice is the only thing that reaches me anymore." He closed his eyes. "The month isn't over." "No, it isn't. But I cannot wait any longer, Marin. I cannot pretend that I am not desperately, completely in love with you. I cannot maintain distance when every moment apart feels like dying by inches." She should insist on finishing the month. She should maintain her resolve. But watching him choose restraint over vengeance, watching him listen to her voice through the red haze of protective fury, something had shifted inside her. "Then don't wait," she whispered. His eyes flew open. "What?" "Don't wait. Don't pretend. Don't maintain distance." She smiled through sudden tears. "Ask me again, Kyle. Ask me to marry you. And this time, I'll say yes." For a moment, Kyle did not move. He stared at her, as though she had spoken in a language he did not understand, as though her words were too extraordinary to process. "You're serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life. But the month, your conditions, your need for certainty. I have certainty." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I watched you choose restraint over revenge. I watched you listen when every instinct demanded blood. I watched the man emerge from the monster, and I realized that I have been waiting for proof. That doesn't exist." "Proof?" That doesn't exist? Proof that you will never frighten me. Proof that your intensity will never overwhelm me. Proof that loving you will be safe. She shook her head. But love is not safe, Cale. It never has been. It is a leap into darkness, hoping that someone will catch you. And when I looked at you today, sword at your enemy's throat, fury in your eyes, I was not afraid. What were you? Proud. The word surprised her even as she said it. I was proud that you fought for me. Proud that you controlled yourself when I asked. Proud that my voice mattered more than your rage. And I realized that I have been running from something I should be running toward. He made a sound, low and broken, and pulled her against him. Say it again, he demanded against her hair. Say you'll marry me. I'll marry you. Say you love me. I love you, Kyle Ashenmore. I love your intensity and your darkness and your broken, beautiful soul. I love that you would burn kingdoms for me and that you chose not to because I asked. I love the monster and the man and everything in between. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and Maren felt every barrier she had erected crumble to dust. When they finally parted, both flushed and unsteady, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. I have something for you. Now? Now. He pulled back, reaching into his coat, and withdrew a small velvet box. I have been carrying this for 2 weeks, since the day I knew I would never want anyone else. He opened the box. Inside lay a ring unlike anything Maren had ever seen. A deep violet stone, the exact shade of her eyes, surrounded by small diamonds set in silver filigree. It was beautiful and strange and perfect. This belonged to my grandmother, Cale said quietly. She was not a duchess by birth. She was a soldier's daughter, a woman who married my grandfather, when everyone told her she was mad to wed a man with more scars than sense. They were together for 47 years. She said the secret was simple. Love the man, not the title. See the person, not the position. And never, ever let him brood alone when he can be brooding with company. Maren laughed through her tears. She sounds wonderful. She would have adored you. He took her hand. Marry me, Maren. Be my wife, my partner, my reason to be better than I was. Help me build something worthy of the sacrifices that brought us both here. Be my duchess, my love, my home. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice rough. What I feel for you, it will never diminish. It will never become comfortable or quiet or tame. I will love you with the same intensity in 50 years that I love you with now. I will never stop wanting to protect you, to cherish you, to burn worlds for you if necessary. That sounds exhausting. Undoubtedly. But also, I hope, extraordinary. She looked at the ring on her finger, at this impossible man who had somehow become the center of her world. One condition, she said. His expression flickered with concern. Name it. The burning worlds. You check with me first. She smiled. We're partners now. We make decisions together, even the dramatic world-burning ones. The laugh that escaped him was full and warm and surprised. You are negotiating terms of our marriage while I am still on one knee? The best time to negotiate is when the other party is emotionally compromised. She grinned. I learned that from watching you deal with Lord Castellan. Thank God. He pulled her down into his arms. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being outwitted by you, aren't I? Very probably. Good. He kissed her again. I would not have it any other way. They stayed wrapped around each other in the great hall as the afternoon light faded, neither willing to be the first to let go. Outside, Captain Garrick quietly redirected all staff away from the hall and began making arrangements for a ducal wedding. It was, he would later tell Mistress Gwyneth, the least surprising development of his entire military career. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the ancient chapel of Ashenmore. It was not a grand affair by aristocratic standards. No hundreds of guests, no elaborate decorations, no week-long celebrations. Instead, there were 50 witnesses, flowers from the moor arranged by Mistress Gwyneth, and a bride whose hands trembled as she spoke her vows. Maren wore a gown of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with her mother's lace veil that had been sent from the countryside where the older woman now resided. Her mother had wept upon learning of the engagement, tears of joy that her daughter had found not merely security but love. She was too frail to make the journey north, but her blessing had arrived in a letter Maren carried close to her heart. She walked down the aisle alone, belonging to no one but herself. Until she reached Kyle. He stood at the altar in his military dress uniform, medals gleaming, the scars on his face visible in the candlelight. He looked fierce and formal and absolutely terrified. "You came," he breathed as she took her place beside him. "Did you think I wouldn't? I have been standing here for an hour, convinced you would come to your senses and flee. And miss the chance to become a duchess? Never." The laugh that escaped him drew scandalized looks from the elderly vicar. They spoke their vows with steady voices, though Maren saw the way Kyle's hand shook when he placed the ring on her finger, the way his eyes glistened when she promised to love him until death parted them. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the vicar intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Kyle kissed her with reverent gentleness, as though she were something precious and fragile, and Maren kissed him back with all the passion she had been holding in reserve. The chapel erupted in applause. That evening, after the modest feast had ended and the guests had departed, Kale led Maren to the ducal chambers. "You're nervous," she observed, as he closed the door behind them. "Terrified," he admitted. "I have commanded armies, stormed fortifications, survived battles that should have killed me. But this, you. I'm just a woman, Kyle. You are not just anything." He crossed to her, cradling her face in his hands. "You are the most important person in my world, and I am terrified of disappointing you." "Then don't." She smiled up at him. "Love me. That's all I want. Love me, and let me love you back." He made a sound, low and reverent, and kissed her. What followed was everything she had hoped for, tender and passionate, clumsy and perfect. He touched her like she was sacred. She touched him like he was finally hers. And when they lay tangled together afterward, hearts still racing, Kyle spoke into the darkness. "I have one more thing to give you." "More? I already have a ring, a title, and a husband who is frankly exhausting." He laughed softly. "This is different." He reached to the bedside table and produced a folded document. "Read it." She sat up, wrapping the sheet around herself, and moved closer to the candle. It was a legal declaration. She read it twice before the meaning sank in. "This says my father's debt is forgiven." It does. But that debt is why I'm here. Why I came to Ashenmore in the first place. Precisely. He sat up beside her. "I do not want you to ever wonder, Maren. Not for a single moment. Not for the rest of our lives together. You are not here because of a debt. You are here because I love you and you love me. The debt is irrelevant. It has been since the moment you chose to stay." She stared at the document, at the official seals and signatures that erased the obligation that had brought her to this place. "You're freeing me. I am ensuring you are already free." He took her hand. "You could walk away tomorrow. The debt would remain forgiven. Your family would retain every benefit they've received. You would owe me nothing." but I would stay. Yes, his smile was soft. Because you want to. Because you choose to. Because you love me. Not because of contracts or obligations or desperate circumstances. Just love. She set down the document and kissed him with everything she had. I choose you, she whispered against his lips. Today, tomorrow, forever. I choose you. 5 years later, the nursery at Ashenmore was the warmest room in the entire fortress. Maren stood in the doorway, watching her husband attempt to read a bedtime story to their twin sons, while their daughter, barely 2 years old, sat on his lap, pulling at his hair. And then the brave knight, Cale continued gamely, despite having lost his place 3 times, defeated the dragon and rode home to his, Rowena darling, that's attached to my head. Want hair? Rowena declared, yanking harder. Yes, I understand that. The knight rode home to his, Edmund. Stop hitting your brother. He looked at me. That's not a crime. The knight rode home to his castle, where the beautiful princess was waiting. Was she as beautiful as Mama? Callum, the elder twin by 4 minutes, asked. Cale looked up and caught Maren's eye across the room. No one is as beautiful as your mother. Maren felt the familiar warmth bloom in her chest. 5 years, and he still looked at her like she was a miracle. All right, my loves. She crossed to the enormous bed, where all 4 of them had somehow piled together. Time to sleep. Papa has early meetings tomorrow. About the bad lord? Edmund asked with childish eagerness. Among other things. Lord Castellan's trial had concluded 2 months ago. The evidence Kyle had assembled, combined with testimony from a dozen other families Castellan had attempted to extort, had resulted in a conviction so thorough that even Castellan's allies had abandoned him. He had been stripped of his lands, his title, and his freedom. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, contemplating the consequences of threatening a woman the Duke of Ashenmore loved. Justice, Maren had decided, was extraordinarily satisfying. She helped Kyle extract himself from the tangle of children and kissed each small forehead before they dimmed the candles and retreated to the corridor. You're thinking about something, Kyle observed as they walked toward their own chambers. I'm thinking about how different my life is from anything I imagined. Better or worse? Infinitely better. She took his hand. When I came here, I expected to survive. I expected to endure until my obligation was complete, and then disappear into obscurity. I never expected any of this. Any of what? She stopped walking and turned to face him. Love, family, purpose, joy. She touched his face. You. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be married to a woman who terrifies me, happily reading bedtime stories to 3 demanding children, I would have had you committed. I terrify you. Constantly. In the best possible way. He pulled her closer. You make me want to be better. You see the man beneath the monster and refuse to let the monster win. You gave me a family when I had resigned myself to dying alone. You terrify me, Maren Ashenmore, and I would not have it any other way. She smiled up at him, this complicated, intense, unexpectedly tender man who had somehow become everything. I love you. I love you more. That sounds like a challenge. It is. One I intend to win every day for the rest of our lives. He kissed her, there in the corridor of their ancient home, with their children sleeping nearby, and their future stretching out before them, full of promise and possibility. Maren Vance had arrived at Ashenmore as a possession to be claimed. She had become a duchess, a wife, a mother, a partner. But most importantly, she had become herself, fully and completely, loved for exactly who she was, by a man who had learned that obsession could become devotion, that possession could become partnership, that monsters could become men when the right woman taught them how. The butcher of Valdres Pass had finally found peace, and Maren had finally found home. Thank you for staying with us through this tale of darkness and redemption, of obsession transformed into love. If this story made your heart race and your eyes water, please show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing it with fellow lovers of passionate romance. Your support keeps our storytelling alive. Stay tuned. Another emotional journey awaits you at the end of this video. Click, listen, and let your heart be swept away once more. Thank you for being here.